very warm welcome to you, Mr. Steve Ahern, for joining us today at the Radio Festival as part of our ninth edition, where we are exploring the theme Reimagining Radio with AI. We are very, very glad to have you with us. And before I hand over the mic to you, I would just like to give a brief introduction to all our viewers. So, Mr. Steve Ahern is an internationally recognized trainer, digital media specialist, technology reporter, and media business consultant. He is the author of the textbook Making Radio and Podcasts and the publisher of the successful trade publications Radio Info, Radio Today, Podcast Info, and Audio Info. Steve was previously the director of the ABU Media Academy in Malaysia, manager of ABC Radio in Sydney, director of the radio faculty at Australia's elite media university AFTRS, and held other senior executive roles at the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. His early career included work as a reporter, producer, announcer, and program director in radio. He was awarded an Order of Australia Medal in the 2009 Queen's Birthday Honours List for his contribution to media and training in Australia. Steve currently works with media companies around the world to help them evolve and adapt successfully in the changing media environment. I am Nitika Kakar from the Radio Festival, and we are deeply, deeply honored to have you here with us today, Steve. Over to you.
Thank you, Nitika. It's a pleasure to be here talking with you and also talking to all of my friends at the Radio Festival, those who could attend in person at the recent festival and those who are watching us online. So hello to everybody. One of the first things you asked me to address was a bit of my story. Your question was you'd like me to recount my own journey. Well, I won't make it too long, but here it is. I think people who love radio somehow find it's in their blood. And so as a kid, I found it was in my blood, and I was just interested in this funny box where voices and information and songs came out of it. I don't know how particularly, but I was always interested in radio and listening to lots of radio, like so many radio people who just have the bug inside them. So there was a radio station opposite my high school when I went to school, and it was one of the biggest and best known stations in Sydney where I grew up. And after school, I would go and bother them. And when I was old enough in the last couple of years of school, they'd allow me to come in and sit and watch and help them and teach me things. And eventually I got some work as a casual there, just pushing the buttons and knobs on the network desks because I loved it and they could see I loved it. So I have to credit all those wonderful people at 2UE, that was the name of the station, who just helped me, gave me tips, told me what they were doing, and I was like a sponge. I just grabbed it up. I learned a lot. I worked a little bit and volunteered a lot and just spent time. And in the 1980s, when I was then leaving school, going to uni, community radio started in Australia. And a lot of the community stations began in universities. And the uni I went to had one called 2SER. So, of course, being the radio geek that I was, I went there and volunteered, and I got a morning program. I was editing content. I was recording the lecturers and teaching them how to do a much better radio program. So that was always fun. I kind of turned the tides on them. They knew a lot about their subject, but I knew a lot about radio. So that was my fun of radio, and I always thought it would be a hobby. But my mum said, well, you've got to get a real job. So I studied teaching at university, and I went to the outback in Australia where I was teaching for a few years. But down the road, and I mean 100 kilometres of a red dirt road in the outback. Down the road was a community radio station, and I would go there on the weekends and do a couple of radio programs. Eventually, they offered me a job. It paid better than teaching, and it was more fun than teaching fourth class. So I accepted that, and that led me to my professional career path of radio. And over time, those jobs that you mentioned at Australian Film, TV and Radio School and the ABU Media Academy, it kind of combined that hobby of radio with the profession that I was learning of teaching. Over the years, I did a lot of things. I managed some radio stations, as you said. I started my own trade publishing company and training company. And that's what I do these days, traveling all around the world. And I've worked in places like Afghanistan and South Sudan. I've worked for the starting up a talk radio station in Singapore, all around the world, interacting with, at first, just radio companies, but now it's bigger than radio. So these days I work with anyone who is using audio in their medium.
That's absolutely lovely. And we are very, very grateful to learn from your wealth of experience today. So, Steve, as you mentioned, you've been associated with the community radio from a very early age. And you've had such a a different experience over the decades with the medium. So, how do you think over the decades the medium has evolved?
Well, good that you mentioned community radio, and I know that the Radio Festival and the key people there are very involved with community radio. That is a core of our business. Mostly in most places in the world, there's three major types of radio business. One is commercial radio to make profits for the owners. The other one is government or people's radio in a way, the BBC or the ABC model, which is owned by the taxpayers of that country, or sometimes government radio, which is controlled by the government of the day. But either way, it's government funded. And the third type of business is community radio, which is community funded and community supported. And I mention that because that's part of the evolution of radio. So we know that commercial radio is there to make a profit. That's a good thing. Sometimes people dismiss that, but there's a lot of money in commercial, profitable radio businesses. And that's what makes radio so edgy, so vibrant, because when there's money involved, people put a lot of energy into it. But of course, if we only had commercial radio in the world, then there would be some important things that governments want to do that wouldn't be done and wouldn't be broadcast. And so that's why we need the other balancing part, the radio backed by taxes or government payments in some way, so that governments can communicate their message. And at grassroots level, community radio is the voice of the people by the people. Now, over the years, community radio in different countries lost some of its energy because after a while people wanted to leave, they wanted to get paid jobs, they didn't volunteer, or maybe money was scarce. Commercial radio has been challenged by new commercial streams, music streams, podcasts, so that's under threat now. And government radio, of course, has been challenged because governments are expected to do more with the money that they have. So the evolution is about all the external factors coming on these sectors of the radio business, and each one of them is reinventing itself in different ways. Commercial radio is monetizing the catch-up radio and podcasts that we know of. Government radio is, I think, playing a really important role now in verifying facts, in dealing with complexity, because audiences who listen to those stations are intelligent people who are comfortable with complexity. And community radio is more and more important because we don't always know what's real and what's fake out there now. But if we can see the person on the radio, if we can meet them down the street, at the shops, at the playground, at the school, then they have to face us every day and we can question them. And if they're faking something, then we'll soon know it. So the evolution that you've asked about is the business model is changing. The way audiences are consuming what we used to call radio, but now let's start calling it audio. That's changing because there are so many more devices we can choose to listen to our audio on. And our relationship with radio is changing as well in the face of a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there on the other media. And I like to distinguish between professional responsible media, television, radio, newspaper companies, legitimate newspaper companies. They're responsible media because they have an editorial process, which is gather the information, check first, then publish. Compare that with social media, where the business model is publish first, check later. And that's why they're open to so much manipulation, and the spread of misinformation and disinformation can go so quickly because we have these irresponsible publishers called social media out there that don't have a checking editorial process in them. So as we evolve, it'll be really important that those of us in professional media who are not trying to make up fake information, we really want to do our jobs properly, that we stick to our protocols, which is check first, publish later, rather than the other way around.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you. And, it's very interesting that you brought out the aspect of how community radios and, government backed radios are playing the role of, have kind of taken on the role of watchdogs and against the spread of misinformation, against the spread of fake news, and are acting as barriers for their community in their protection. So, and because we're talking about community, because we're talking about community radio and how things have evolved, one of the things I would like your perspective on, Steve, is over the years, our very idea and understanding of how we define community has changed. Earlier, geography, location used to play an important part when we used to talk about what is our community. But with internet, that understanding has also changed. It has evolved. So if I were to ask you that in today's time, how does a radio define its community? What would be your response?
Yeah, that's such an important point because you're right. Radio was limited by the geography of the physical broadcast transmitter in the past. How much could it cover? AM, FM, DAB, whatever it might be. But nowadays, any radio station that's also streaming on the internet has the world's largest transmitter. The output can go anywhere. So we are not limited by geography. What we're limited by is interest. So I know a small radio station in Juba in South Sudan called iRadio. I know that they have a very small listenership in the rest of the world because not too many people are interested in what's happening in a little country in Africa. Well, maybe they are at the moment because there's a lot of conflict there. But anyway, over the years, there's been not so much interest. The people who listen to it are people from South Sudan who've moved to another country, but nobody else, because there's, if you live in a big city like Sydney, where I live, probably there's nothing much of interest in a little town in Africa. But so the interest has to be there. There's so much radio, but not lots of it is listened to because there's not a lot of interest. So a shared interest is really important. Curiosity is important. If I do want to know what's happening in the conflict in Juba, Or maybe I'm interested in the weather in Dublin because I'm going there. I might listen to Sunshine FM, one of the stations I listen to there. Or perhaps if I'm coming to Delhi, I might want to know what are the political news stories. So I might listen to one of your stations. So interest is a factor. But the most significant thing is the communities themselves. So we call it communities of interest. Now, what is my community? Well, I'm an Australian, so I could connect with Australians around the world. I'm a person who's interested in radio, so I'm in a radio community. I love technology, so I'm in a technology community. So these days, all the output of radio, and let me expand it to all the output of audio, podcasts as well, we can search by subject, especially if your radio station has speech to text or summaries of what was in the program. People can find the information. If they are in that community of interest, they can listen live or listen back, or they can find a podcast that maybe your radio company made, and they've joined you in the community of interest. There's good and bad about that. One of the bad things is if you're a commercial radio station and you're funded by advertising, and let's say I have a station here in Sydney that makes a lot of money from advertising. If I have some listeners in Delhi, maybe those advertisers of a shop in Sydney don't want them. They don't care. So there's a cost to streaming around the world, but there's not always a return in advertising. There are ways to monetize, but it's not the traditional way. So that's part of the evolution you were asking about. Now we're monetizing via third-party platforms that might insert local ads or might monetize the podcast by targeting messages at people. So there's a lot of complexity, but the core of it is that there are still plenty of audiences for radio. There are still many people listening around the world, and they can choose more and more things to listen to that fall into their area of interest or their community of interest. And if they're in a community of interest, then they're part of people around the world who feel the same. I love talking radio to you at Radio Days Europe, which has just been on, or at IBC in Amsterdam. And I feel when I go to those conferences that I'm part of a community of people who are like me, who are interested in the same things as me. That's what a community of interest is. It might be your gender. It might be your sexuality. It might be your business interests, your specialty. But you can be part of a worldwide community of interest.
That's very interesting to know, Steve. And you are right in defining, the definition of the community of interest that you just gave. I think it also sits perfectly with how we also consume any kind of content presently on over the internet, and even the topics that we are interested in. So you talked about how certain radios or radio stations, or even we as professionals, are defining our own communities of interest and are seeking those avenues, those radio stations or those audio platforms or any other media platforms that can give us that content, that can give us that information. So while we are on this, and because we are exploring the topic of AI, and how we are reimagining or rethinking radio with AI. So coming to that, I would like you to kindly share some examples with us as to how is AI being currently used within the industry and within the medium of radio.
I think there are some good and some bad uses. The bad uses are lazy uses, where people go to ChatGPT, Perplexity, DeepSeek, all of those publicly available free tools. And instead of sitting and thinking about writing a script on something or researching something, let's say it is about how radio transmitters work, then I could sit, I could research, I could think about it, I could ask some colleagues, I could go to the engineering department and talk to an engineer and learn something about how they work. I could maybe look out my window and look at the transmitter across the field. Or I could type into ChatGPT, how do radio transmitters work? Write me a script of 5 paragraphs for a radio interview about it. That's lazy. And it doesn't go deeper. It doesn't allow you as a staff member, a producer, or a researcher to deepen your knowledge. And it lets down your audience, I think. So people who are doing that, who work in radio, to me are lazy. Now I get it, everything's fast, we're time poor, all those things, but it actually doesn't take too much longer if you're getting good at it to quickly check something, think about it, and then write in your own words. Then use AI in a good way. Let it check the spelling, let it check the grammar, let it suggest to you a better, more conversational way to frame those few paragraphs that you've done. So I'm definitely not against AI, but I'm against the lazy use of AI, and I'm against AI's exploitation of our business. And I'll come back to that in a minute, because AI tools, free ones, are certainly doing that. The good uses of AI are when it helps us do the repetitive things that we have to do all the time better and faster. So a couple of examples. Background noise. Now, I'm sitting in my office here in Sydney. It's a bit of an open room. There may be some echo in this call, or maybe if I opened my window, somebody might be mowing the lawn, so you might hear the sound of a lawnmower. Or if I was being interviewed at a conference, there would be background noise. One of the most amazing things that AI tools can do is remove background noise, remove echo, change the background acoustics. It can do that in exactly the same way as I would do it manually. How I would do that in my audio editor, I would go to the equalizer. I would work out what's the sound of the echo or the lawnmower. Could be 1,000 hertz audio frequency, or the sound of background chatter and the rippling fountain that could be 2,000 hertz. And after I've done that, I would manually change the equalization. That would probably take me 10 minutes, and I'm good at it. Or I can use the AI tool like Descript or Clear Voice, and I can say remove background noise, and just like that, all the background noise is gone. So those sort of tools, which sit inside our systems and can't be exploited, they are great tools. And the last point I made is coming back to that AI exploitation. When you use a free program, like if you use the free version of Clean Voice or Descript or ChatGPT, never forget the old marketing saying, when something is free, you are the product. So when they give it to you for free, what are they doing? Well, that tool is stealing your question, your prompt. It's stealing your knowledge of those equalization frequencies and how you would manually manipulate it, and it's learning from it. Now, that's amazing. No, nothing wrong with the technical process, but it's stealing your work so that it can give that work to someone else, the next person who asks the question in ChatGPT or asks for background noise to be removed. So, we've got to understand how AI works and the business model. And the business model is, if it's free, it's using what's in your brain to make itself better. But if you're paying for it, if it's a professional integration into one of your radio systems, then it's still doing the same thing, but it's doing it inside your closed workshop and your own environment, not allowing that knowledge to go to your competitors next time they ask for it.
That's a very important point, Steve. And thank you for sharing that. And, while we are on the topic of the various ways, like you mentioned, the lazy ways and, the good ways of using AI for our radio and audio programs, talking about audio also today. So, in that sense, I would also like to know from you that as of now, which are, according to you, the untapped areas or the underutilized areas within a program production cycle, where AI is, um, either being used in a limited manner or not being used at all, but which has the potential where AI can, elevate the process or make it more streamlined, or optimize it for us as radio programmers, as practitioners.
I'll give you a couple of examples. Let's first think about live radio. So, if we were talking on radio now, we would be going out. Whoever is listening would listen, and those who didn't know we were on would miss it. But how could they find us, and how could they know what we were talking about? Well, if we turned on our AI speech to text function in almost live captioning of what we were doing, then those words of our conversation would be there. And then if we overlaid on that AI search tools, so AI mostly searches via text. Even when it's searching audio, it transfers the audio to text form. So because we as a radio station output have our live broadcast transcribed, it might be as a caption or it might just be as metadata, then AI can use that. And when I talked about the station in the outback, which was 15 minutes ago in our conversation, AI could put a marker, Outback Radio Australia, and they could know that my name is Steve Ahern and that we talked about this at the Radio Festival's live radio show or whatever it might be. Then it's easy to search. You don't have to go and listen to the whole 3-hour radio program. Once you've searched it, you know what you're looking for. You've searched it. It'll take you to a direct bookmark at that timestamp, and the person can listen to what we said about that. So that's a huge, powerful tool that live radio has never had, and we should be exploiting that more in a good way to allow our content to be found much more readily. A second tool is podcast summarizing and chapterizing. There's various companies that do that. I mentioned one of them, Descript. You can make your podcast, and as you upload it to your host, then that host can listen. In other words, take speech to text, index it as words, and then listen to the content. And the AI overlaid on that, which is the power. I mean, we've been doing speech to text for a long while, but AI brings understanding. So the AI can kind of listen to it and can figure out, okay, question 1 is about this person's history. Question 3 was about technology. So it can put a chapter marker, and at 1 minute in, the person's history was talked about. At 7 minutes in, the technology was talked about. Now, when you listen to a podcast or you go to YouTube and you watch a YouTube video, how powerful is that? That you can see the chapter markers and you can jump to the bit you want. So that's what AI can do, especially for podcasts. It can give a summary. It can give timestamps and markers. It doesn't absolve you as the editor and publisher from checking it, because sometimes it will be wrong, but gosh, it's right a lot of the time, and it's so much faster than doing it manually. To me, those two tools are some of the most important that we should use because they help findability. We know how powerful our audio is. We just want people to find it. So now that we're on the internet or on a podcast platform, if we can help our audience to find it, then we'll get bigger audiences and we'll be growing radio into the new ways that people are listening to it.
That's very, very interesting, Steve. Thank you. And that's extremely helpful information, especially the live TV aspect, the live radio aspect that you mentioned. When we talk about AI, and while there are so many amazing ways from bookmarking to understanding where AI can help us in our radio programming, there is one inherent fear across industries with the use of AI, is that it is taking away people's jobs, and it is impacting their livelihood. So do you think this is true when it comes to the radio industry? And how do you think, with currently with the AI coming into the industry, and let's say the next 5 years, how do you see the economies of the business changing?
Well, yes, it's true. AI will take away jobs. It will take away jobs from lazy people who don't want to keep learning and who want the lazy way out, and maybe they didn't deserve their good job anyway. No doubt there will be fewer of the same jobs that we know of now, the job titles of producer and researcher and audio producer and all of that. Yes, those jobs will decrease. But don't forget that radio, especially live radio, is a shared experience. So AI will not replace people on the radio. Yes, of course, you can generate a fake radio announcer. Of course you can. But it's not going to replace us because of that real connection that I was talking about earlier. But what it will replace are people who want to do things in the same slow way as they used to do them always, and feel like it's their right because they've had this job for 20 years and I've been doing this way forever, and so you should keep me employed. Well, sure, maybe if I ran a radio station, I would like to, but it's a business and I have to make sure that costs are balanced with revenue and all those sort of things. And that's always a business pressure. And people who run radio businesses have always thought like that. When there's plenty of money, no problem. But when times are tight, people do lose their jobs and they do get replaced by people who can do more with less or can use new tools. So we are in an era where there are new tools, and it's inevitable that jobs will be lost, but new jobs will be created. People will be hired who can use the new tools, and there will be brand new jobs. Instead of 3 salespeople going out, selling advertising, coming back, writing a creative brief, getting the details, going back and forth to the advertiser, one person can probably now do that job if they have the audio sales app on their phone, and they can record the client. Hello, I'm Mr. Client. I sell cricket bats and I make them here in my cricket bat factory in Mumbai. And they're great bats, blah, blah, blah. And you can get him to talk into that. And you can press some buttons and that will generate a script from what that person said. Right there, not sending it back, not faxing it, going back, writing, talking to the creative people. It can generate an instant script. Now, it may not be very good, but that's not what you want in the sales process. You just want someone to be convinced and enthused to buy. So you can generate the script. You can then get a voice clone of one of the famous radio people on your station who have agreed and been paid to have their voice cloned. And you can have the script quickly AI generated into a 30-second script. You can press Nitika, choose Nitika's voice, and the client can hear it in your voice. And then you can use that tool to go back to your costing program back at your station, and you can present the client when he says, oh, that sounds good. Yeah, I'm interested in that. How much would it cost? Click. Well, this is what it will cost for 1 week worth of advertising on the radio. And of course, this is just showing you what could be done. We'll come back, we'll take it to our production team, and we'll make it even better for you. Would you like to sign the deal right now? So, case closed, product sold. And you go back, you turn it around pretty quickly. There's still production people involved. There's still creative people involved. There's still salespeople involved, but they're doing it differently and more quickly because they have to be more competitive.
That's an excellent example, Steve. And when we are talking about this, what it also makes me wonder is that as we are reimagining how AI is changing our workflows, it is changing our way of the process, thinking through the process of production. Is it also kind of changing the way we look at our radio presenters or producers? And because we also have we already in India also we have AI RJs. We have AI RJs at the global level in different countries. I have seen different stations having their own AI RJs. So when we talk about a radio used to always be identified. Each radio had this unique voice or this unique person that the community would identify within the station, or they would tune in to listen to them. So are we kind of what are your thoughts on this? Are we losing the people focused or the edge of radio, or is that also where somewhere down the line we will see more of AI, less of humans? Or do you think that that is one aspect of radio which will stay intact?
I think there'll be lots of people and stations that will try it, and there are already. As you say, there's quite a few AI DJs there in India. Malaysia and Indonesia have really experimented with that, and all around the world. I have no doubt there will be AI-generated voices and content from time to time, but I think it's a trap, because the human connection in this live medium, this live audio medium that we work in, is really powerful. And if people eventually come to feel that they don't have a connection, it may as well just be a robot reading, then it might be a novelty for a while. And I think the stations that are doing it now are playing on the novelty factor. Can't blame them. It's interesting. People talk about it. But I don't think those kind of shows and those kind of AI-generated fake personalities with fake content will stand the test of time. You may use them as part of your automated playback in shifts where there are very small numbers, like in the middle of the night, to pay a radio announcer, let's say 70,000 Australian dollars in my country, to do a shift in the middle of the night where there might be 10,000 people listening, is not very worthwhile. So that could be a place where it would be cost effective to put a synthesized voice. You wouldn't let them say too much, but they might just be the hello, here's the time, tomorrow's weather is so-and-so, this is the name of the song, and that might be enough. But in prime time, no, certainly not in breakfast, nor in any daytime shift, in my opinion. Yes, these things will be tried, but I think those stations who are trying them, good on them for experimenting, but I think they'll find that they're not going to hold the audience as real people would. And so they'll soon abandon them. We have to try things. Why not? It's there, but let's try it and learn from it. And if, as I believe, and the experience I've seen already is starting to show me, that it's not really making the connection, and in the end you're going to lose listeners, then in those circumstances I think people will just end up getting rid of that idea.
We are talking about radio and the shift of radio. We are talking about audio and how the medium is changing. So in today's world, and how we are bombarded with media and media content from everywhere. It's a media saturated world, as it is called. So in that scenario, what role do you think radio and audio is playing today? And do you still think it is working towards strengthening its own communities, strengthening and building the connection that it has always been known for with people, with communities? Do you think that is still happening? And do you think that will
Yes.
continue to happen?
Yes, I think it is still happening and it will continue. Yes, there's so much competition, and the biggest competition is from search and social media. And for the last 10 years, we've seen that those companies have taken all the advertising money, they've taken the attention span of people. They've integrated themselves into every device, and people are constantly scrolling and looking. And look, that's new, and that's the power of those things. And I find them wonderful. They're amazing technologies. But now, after 10, 15, 20 years, we as humans are coming to the realization that those media, the way they're formulated to steal our attention for so long, it's not good for us. There's a lot of things that we're discovering from court cases for the big social media companies and through social media bans like we have introduced in Australia. You're not allowed to have a social media account until you're older than 16 here in Australia. Now, we know that, kids will get around that, but it's not about catching someone for breaking the law. It's about creating an expectation. And a law like that makes the expectation that kids will not have a social media account. So they will not be with their faces in their phone in the playground. They'll be out there playing, interacting, socializing, spending time with their parents and siblings, and all those important things. And then when they're 16, when their brains are ready for it, then maybe they can face this amazing world of social media, which grabs their time and will give them lots of information and lots of connection, but will also give them doom scrolling and anxiety and all those sort of things. So as we've learnt this, it's not that these tools should be dismissed. They bring great value to our world, but we have to understand the negatives. In that context, radio is, in a way, the low-tech friend that you can always rely on, that will be there in the playground with you, not banned from your phone. And you can't be tracked if you listen to the radio. You can't have someone make a nasty comment on the social media comments part, because radio doesn't have that. You can't have bad pictures and emojis because there's no visuals on the radio. So I think that there's a turn coming. No doubt audiences have gone away from radio because there was something more attractive in other media. But as time goes on, radio's still there, and people are starting to remember the value of radio, this low-tech but beautiful personal connection between you and me, straight through my ears to my brain from your mouth. So this is a pretty powerful connection. It's always been there in radio. Sometimes we've forgotten about it in this modern environment, but it's still there, and people are realizing the value of it.
Right. Steve, would you like to have a glass of water or anything? We will just wrap up. We're at the last question. So if you want, please feel free.
I'm okay now. Thank you.
Okay. So okay. So as we are talking, reimagining radio with AI, which is our theme for this year, if I would like to ask you, Steve, what is your vision when you imagine audio or radio with AI in the future, let's say 10, 20 years down the line? So, what does that vision look like? What does that reimagination look like?
I want my radio program to be connected with people who I never would have reached in the past. And I want AI to help me do that. I want them to know me as a person. So AI might present them with some facts and figures about me. It might present them with some pictures. It might bring me into their multiple feeds on their phone, which will then lead them back to my program as either a live program or catch up or a podcast. So that's the first thing I would like it to help me with. I would like it to make it easier to monetize what I do. So if my radio program was on a station that sold advertising, I'd want it to help me sell that better, to reach out to new advertisers, to prove to them the value of what I do. The rating system that most countries use is quite outdated. It just counts share of audience or numbers of people listening. But these days, we have to prove how much time was spent. So listening time, engagement, listening minutes. I want AI to help me summarize all of that for all my listeners so I can show how successful my program is and sell it to advertisers. And I'm not afraid of what AI will bring. I'm very happy to use AI in whatever new ways it's going to evolve into, but I want that to be under my control. I don't want it to be under a big multinational company whose motives that I don't understand. I don't want it to be part of manipulation for people putting fake news out there. I want it to enhance what I do because I want to make good programs that connect with people, that bring them the information they want to know, that help them understand complexity, and that allow them to talk to me as well as me talking to them. And if it can help me do that, then that's the future of AI that I want to see.
That's lovely. And on that thought, I think it's a very nice and optimistic thought to kind of wrap up our conversation today. And thank you so much, Steve, for your time. Thank you so much for your insights. This has been a really, really valuable and helpful conversation in not just understanding what the role of AI as we move into the future, but you have also provided us with the grounding of the radio's past, the radio's evolution, and how we do not how we should not forget those roots going forward, because that is the true spirit of the medium, that is the true spirit of audio, that actually connects us all. So thank you so much. It's been lovely speaking to you and to gain this insight.
Thanks, Nitika. What a wonderful conversation. Thank you.